tens of thousands of years ago when modern humans first started exploring beyond Africa. These early adventurers left their homeland around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, moving in small groups to find new places to live. Some of them followed the southern coast of Asia, a route that took them through places like the Middle East and eventually to the Indian subcontinent. When they arrived in India, these settlers became the ancestors of a group scientists now call the ancient Ancestral South Indians, or AASI for short. These were the very first people to call India home, and their descendants have been living there ever since. Today, the strongest traces of their DNA, the genetic material that gets passed down through generations, are found in the people of South India. That's why South Indian DNA is often described as ancient. It connects directly back to some of the earliest humans who settled in this part of the world. To understand this better, let's think about what DNA is. It's like a blueprint that carries information about where we come from, stored in every cell of our bodies. By studying DNA, scientists can figure out how different groups of people are related and how they moved around the planet long ago. In India, the story starts with those early AASI settlers. For thousands of years, they lived as hunter-gatherers, collecting food from the wild and adapting to India's diverse landscapes. Their DNA became distinct over time, shaped by their environment and way of life. But they weren't the only ones who came to India. Over the centuries, other groups arrived, and their mixing with the AASI changed the genetic picture across the country. What makes South India special is that its people kept more of that original AASI DNA compared to other regions. So, what happened after those first settlers arrived? For a long stretch, tens of thousands of years, the AASI were the main inhabitants of India. They spread out across the subcontinent, living in small communities. Then, around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, a new group showed up. These were farmers from a region that's now part of Iran. They brought with them knowledge of growing crops and raising animals, skills they developed in their homeland. When they reached northwestern India, they didn't just settle in isolation. They mixed with the AASI who were already there, blending their DNA together. This mixing created a new population that eventually built one of the world's first big cities in a place called the Indus Valley. The Indus Valley Civilization, as it's known, was a bustling society with trade, writing, and advanced farming, but the story doesn't stop there. A few thousand years later, around 3,500 to 4,000 years ago, another wave of people arrived. These were pastoralists, herders who raised livestock like sheep and cattle from the grassy plains of Central Asia, often called the steppes. They spoke languages that would later evolve into things like Sanskrit, which is tied to many modern Indian languages. When these steppe pastoralists moved into northern India, they mixed with the people already living there, including those from the Indus Valley who were themselves a blend of AASI and Iranian farmers. This created a new genetic mix in the north, which scientists call the Ancestral North Indians, or ANI. Meanwhile, down in South India, things were different. The steppe pastoralists didn't travel as far south in large numbers, so the people there stayed more connected to their AASI roots with less of this new Central Asian influence. Now, let's break this down a bit. All Indians today have some AASI ancestry because those early settlers were the starting point for everyone in the subcontinent. But the proportions differ depending on where you look. In the north, people have more ANI ancestry, which includes that steppe pastoralist DNA along with the earlier mix of AASI and Iranian farmers. In the south, the balance tips toward the AASI with some Iranian farmer ancestry but much less from the steppe group. It is not that South Indians didn't mix with others, they did, but the later migrations from Central Asia had a weaker impact there. This means South Indian DNA has a higher share of that ancient AASI component, linking it more directly to those first settlers from 60,000 years ago. How do we know all this? Scientists have been studying DNA from both modern people and ancient skeletons to piece it together. For example, Back in 2009, a team led by a researcher named David Reich looked at the DNA of living Indians. They found that most people in India are a mix of two main ancestral groups, the Ani in the north and the AASI, or Ancestral South Indians, who are more prominent in the south. The AASI themselves are a combination of the original AASI and those Iranian farmers from thousands of years ago. Then, in 2019, another study by a scientist named Vagesh Narasimhan went even deeper. They analyzed DNA from ancient bones found in places like the Indus Valley and confirmed that South Indians today have more ancestry from the AASI than people in the north do. These studies use complex tools, like comparing tiny differences in DNA, to map out how these ancient groups mixed over time. Let's zoom in on South India for a moment. Among the people there, especially in Dravidian-speaking communities like those who speak Tamil, Telugu, or Kannada and certain tribal groups, the AASI ancestry stands out. Groups like the Irula or Paniya, who live in southern states, often have a particularly strong genetic tie to those early hunter-gatherers. In contrast, someone from a northern state like Punjab or Haryana would have more DNA from the steppe pastoralists layered on top of the earlier mixes. It is not about one group being pure or another being mixed. Everyone in India is a blend. It's just that the recipe varies, and South India's recipe has more of that ancient AASI flavor. Why did this difference happen? Geography played a big role. South India is separated from the north by natural barriers like the Vindhya and Satpura mountain ranges. These rugged hills made it harder for people to move back and forth, so the south didn't see as much of the later migrations that swept through the north. The dense forests and coastal plains of the south also helped keep communities distinct. On top of that, the way people lived added another layer. In India, many groups have practiced endogamy for centuries, which means marrying within their own community or caste. This habit, which got stricter about 2,000 years ago, kept genetic profiles from blending too much across regions. In South India, this meant the AASI ancestry stayed more intact, passed down through generations with less change from outside groups. This ancient DNA isn't just a fun fact, it tells us something bigger about human history. The AASI were part of that first wave of humans who left Africa and spread across the world. By looking at South Indian DNA, scientists can learn about how those early travelers lived and what made them unique. For instance, the AASI probably developed traits to handle India's hot, humid climate, things like better sweat glands or resistance to certain diseases. Some of those traits might still be in South Indians today, though scientists are still figuring out the details. The DNA also connects South India to other places. The AASI shares some genetic links with groups like the indigenous people of the Andaman Islands, who live just off India's southeastern coast, and even Aboriginal Australians. These connections hint that South India was a key stop on the ancient highway humans took across Asia. Speaking of the Andamanese, they're an interesting piece of the puzzle. These islanders aren't direct descendants of the AASI, but their DNA is thought to be similar because they also come from that early coastal migration out of Africa. Scientists use their genetics as a kind of stand-in to guess what the AASI might have been like before all the mixing happened. By comparing South Indian DNA to the Andamanese, researchers get a clearer picture of those first settlers and how they fit into the global story of human movement. But let's be clear, South Indians aren't frozen in time. Their DNA includes those Iranian farmers from 5,000 years ago and even a little bit of steppe ancestry, just not as much as in the north. The difference is in the balance: more AASI, less steppe. This mix makes South Indian DNA a treasure trove for scientists. It's like a time capsule that holds clues about the deep past, showing how humans adapted and survived over thousands of years. Every time researchers study it, they uncover more about where we all come from. So, why does South Indian DNA feel so ancient? It's because it carries a bigger piece of that original AASI ancestry, tied to people who've been in India for over 50,000 years. While the North saw more newcomers mixing in, the South held on to its older roots thanks to geography, lifestyle, and social habits. This doesn't make South Indians separate from other Indians. Everyone shares some of that AASI heritage. It's just that in the South, that ancient signal comes through a little louder. And as science keeps digging, that signal helps us understand not just India's past, but humanity's journey as a whole. Our genes are a map of where we've been, and South India's DNA is one of the oldest markers on that map.